we're live. Okay, you want to try that? Go for it. Lights, camera, fractions, do it.
Lights, camera, fractions!
Oh, that was pathetic, guys. That was pathetic. Try it again.
Lights, camera, fractions!
All right, that was pretty decent.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully we've got this video thing working again. So, okay, guys. Shh. So just remember, this is a video, right? We're taking a video of this, so it's got to be quiet. So yesterday we worked on adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. People seem to get it pretty easily, pretty straightforward stuff. Today the only problem is the rules are different, and this is really easy too. The rules of this are really easy, but when you combine them with the adding and subtracting, there will be times when you're going to think, oh my God, the signs are the same. Am I supposed to keep the number? Keep the sign in front of the number with the largest absolute value, or am I supposed to multiply? What am I doing, right? That's going to happen. That confusion is going to happen in the beginning. And the only way to get beyond that is practice. Practice in math is the key. And many of you may already know this. And if you do, great. That's awesome, because you're going to need it. So basically, we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to say, I just want to be sure this board is, okay. So let's say I have a positive number, and I'm multiplying it times a positive number. I'm using a dot for multiply. I think I talked about that already, didn't I?
Yeah.
Basically, I don't want to use X's. I could also use parentheses, right? But I prefer the dot in this case. A positive number times a positive number. This is what you've been doing all your life, right? 2 times 4 is 8. So is 8 positive or negative? Positive. It's positive. So when you multiply a positive number times a positive number, you get a positive answer. Now the weird one is this. A negative times a negative is equal to a positive, right? And not a negative times a negative is equal to a positive. How many people knew that before today? I'm just curious. It's not a big deal if you didn't. All right, so all you know-it-alls, why does a negative times a negative equal a positive? Why? It seems almost illogical, doesn't it? I mean, honestly. If you really think about it, it's like, what? How does some people have said, well, 2 negatives make a positive. Or two negative comments suddenly become a positive comment. No, I don't agree with that. That doesn't make sense, right? Does anybody know what a negative sign stands for?
Division.
Luke.
It's under normal. What? Right.
All right. That's. I see what you're saying. Well, yeah. Well, not quite what I'm thinking, but it's an interesting answer. Yeah.
Number that's under 0.
Not necessarily. You're close.
Division or fraction? But
Negative means division or fraction?
no.
What did you mean?
They look.
I'm asking what is a negative sign? What does it stand for? What does it mean? James.
Like a subtraction means you lose this much. So if it's a negative number, it's representing like sort of the same thing, kind of.
Okay, good try. Okay, Gardner.
I was going to say James.
Okay, so let me just tell you what the definition of negative is, okay? Negative means, in quotes, the opposite of. Right? That's the official definition. The opposite of. So if you have a number line, right? And you have 0, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 4. What is the opposite of 4? What? Negative 4, right? So negative 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the opposite. Negative 4 is the opposite of 4. So think about it. If I wrote negative 4, I'm saying the opposite of 4. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes?
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah.
Now, what if I did this, though? What if I said negative 4?
Oh.
Sienna.
It's the opposite of 4.
Right, exactly. Or, to keep it simpler, make this one be the definition and this one be the actual place on the number line. You were right, totally right. It's just that it gets the opposite of 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 2 is, I don't know, I have no idea. Right? So to say the opposite of -4 is +4. Does that make sense? Do you see that? That's why 2 negatives make a positive. 2 negatives multiplied. Gotta be careful what I say. 2 negatives multiplied times each other equal positive, right? Yes, Rosemary.
They're canceling each other out.
Yeah, they technically are.
If
They
you had
technically are.
3, if you had -4, then it would still be -4.
Correct.
Because there's an odd number and they can't
Exactly.
cancel each other out.
Exactly. Jan.
Like, a better way to see it is if you put parentheses around -4,
Right. I agree with you.
and then you put a 1 outside of there. So it's like -1 times -4.
Exactly. Exactly. There's always a -1. Whenever you see minus parenthesis, there's always a -1 in front of that parenthesis. I tend to use, I'm very comfortable just saying negative times negative is positive. So immediately I see, that's +4, right? Either way, totally. So, but what about if we have a negative times a positive?
Negative.
It's going to be a negative. And, for some reason, negative always wins. It's sort of, I think of it like this. If you have a big room of people, right? And half of the people are saying negative things, right? And the other half are saying positive things. Well, you're always still going to have negativity in the room. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's always the negative comments. No matter how positive the positive people are, there's still negative comments. So therefore, it's got to be negative, right? And what about this? What if I said a positive times a negative?
That's still a negative.
That's the same thing. The group of negative people were over here. The group of positive people were over here. They just moved to the other side of the rooms, right? It didn't change anything. There's still negative comments in the rooms, right? It's still negative, right? Okay. Now, these rules also apply to division. It's identical for division. So I could say a positive number divided by a positive number is equal to a positive number. And I could say a negative number divided by a negative number is equal to a positive. I could say a negative divided by a positive is equal to a negative. And I can say a positive divided by a negative is equal to a negative. Now, let's look at this one for a second. Okay? I think you guys are pretty comfortable with this. Actually, let's try just a few of these really fast. A -4 times -6. What's the answer? Positive 24. Negative times negative. I often deal with the negative signs first. I'll go negative times negative is positive, right? So I know it's positive, so then I do 4 times 6 is 24, right? You see how I do that? Separate the signs from the thing. It just sometimes makes it easier. How about 2 times -3?
-6.
-6. A positive times a negative is a negative, and then 2 times 3 is 6. How about -4 times -2? Positive 8, right? Negative times negative is positive. Okay. Now with division, a lot of times you see it, sometimes you'll see it like this. You'll see, -2 divided by -4, right? What would that be? Well, I probably shouldn't have done, that's going to be a fraction, right? But that's okay.
Would it be -0.5?
Yes, it would be -1/2. Think about every fraction is a division problem. And so this sort of shows what I was about to say, is sometimes you'll see it like this, but most often in algebra you won't. Most often in algebra you'll use a fraction to denote division. Does that make sense? And so instead of that, well, if the answer is positive, right? Because negative times negative is, this is divided by. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 2 divided by 4 is 2/4 or 1/2 or 0.5 as Gardner said. Right? Does that make sense? So far? You get this? Yes.
Why is it that like, unless it's a positive with a positive, everything else is negative? There's so much
Well,
negative.
you've got negative times negative is a positive.
Yeah. and there's
Just
that
these
everything
two
else.
stay negative.
Yeah.
These two stay positive. Interesting. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. I mean, further, we're going to create a rule for this. But what if I gave, if typically you're going to see it written as a fraction, okay? So you're going to see something like this. So let's say I had -6 over -3. It's so much easier because immediately I see a negative divided by a negative. Do you see that? When I see a negative upstairs and downstairs, I just go like this. They're suddenly positive. I don't have to worry about them anymore. And then it's just 6 divided by 3. This fraction line can be replaced with the word divided by, right? 6 divided by 3 is 2. So the answer is positive 2. If I had -14 over 2, what would the answer be? -7. Negative divided by positive, negative wins, and it's going to be a 7. If I had 4 divided by -2, what would it be? -2. -2. Okay, so let's look at a rule. We've got 2 rules that come up from this. And these are rules for multiplying two numbers times each other. Okay? I'm not talking about 3 numbers or 4 numbers or 5 numbers. It's only when you're talking about 2 numbers times each other. Okay? Here are the rules. Number 1. If both numbers, I'm going to use that. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Is that okay? If I use that instead of writing the word numbers?
Yes.
Everybody understands what I'm doing? Okay. If both numbers are the same, then the answer is what? Is positive.
But you should say when the signs are the same.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, if both, what am I saying? Not numbers, you're right. If both signs, thank you so much. See, that's why I have you guys in here. If both signs are the same, thank you. I would have looked at that later and thought, oh, shoot, right? If both signs are the same, then the answer is positive, right? Now, the other one is if the signs are different, right, are different, then the answer is negative. So fist to 5 so far. Do you guys understand this? Is it pretty clear? Awesome. That's great. All right. Now, there's one thing though. These were rules for multiplying 2 numbers times each other. Now, Rosemary said something earlier when I was doing the lecture, and she talked about if there's an even number of negatives or an odd number of negatives. And that's a really...
It's negative, it's even, it's positive.
Yes, so there's a third rule. There's a third rule that is not for multiplying 2 numbers. So this is a rule, this is number 3, but it's a rule for multiplying more than 2 numbers, right? More than 2 numbers. Okay, here we go. If, so there's A and B, I guess, right? If there are I'm writing sideways. If there are an even number of negatives, then answer is what?
Positive.
Answer is positive. And you can figure this out. You could have figured it out without me telling you this, but it's also helpful to know, because sometimes problems get really complicated, and you can immediately simplify it by figuring out what is the final sign going to be. So if an odd number of negatives, answer is negative, right?
Yeah.
All right, does that make sense? So let's just try a couple, and then we're done. So hang on. So let's say I had -2 times -3 times -4. Is it going to be positive or negative? If there's an odd number of negatives, it's going to be negative.
24.
2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. All right, what if I did it in a fraction? What if I said -4 times -2 times -3 all over negative -6 times -2. Is that going to be positive or negative?
Negative.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Negative.
It's going to be negative, and now I'm going to just cross out the -2's, right?
1/2.
Right? Because -2 over -2 is the same thing. So that becomes 1. Negative. If you have a fraction with the same thing upstairs as downstairs, it's gone. It's 1, right? All right, we got rid of that. Let's see. 3 goes into
6.
3 once. 3 goes into 6 twice. So now I've got a 2. 2 goes into once. Oh my gosh, the answer is -2.
I solved that.
Am I right?
No, it's -2. Yeah.
-2. That's what I just said. Yeah, yes, exactly. But I already figured out whether it's going to be positive or negative. So all I'm looking at now is the numbers. Does that make sense? You can do it that other way too. It's fine. But just yes,
I
James.
just want to say these notes are going to be really helpful.
There you go. Okay,
they are
awesome.
going to be helpful.
So one last thing I just want to mention, because it's sort of follow-up from yesterday. I did say it yesterday, but it was sort of right at the end of the video that Jan had mentioned this in the lecture. But he said if you had 4 minus a -2, these are the rules that tell you why that becomes a positive. Because 4, and then you've got to do opposite of -2 is +2. Therefore, that becomes 4 plus 2. Does that make sense?
Whoa.
You see it? Negative times a negative is a positive. So when you see negative parenthesis negative, immediately make it a positive. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's all you need to know. So that is the lecture for today. I'm going to just stop this.